The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the window pane in hues of bruised violet, but still, the street outside remained empty. A perfectly baked dessert sat cooling on the countertop. It sent a sweet, mocking perfume in the vast, still kitchen. 76 years. That was the length of time I, Eleanor Vance, had perfected the art of belonging, of quietly existing as the foundation upon which 3 other lives were built. Now, the silence was so profound it felt like a judgment, a physical weight pressing down on my chest. I kept refreshing the call log, though I knew the vibration I craved would never come. It wasn't until 5 p.m., scrolling through the digital chatter, that I saw it. The photo, radiant and undeniable. A pristine table, glowing with candlelight, laughter caught mid-air, and a golden centerpiece that should have been mine. My family had gathered. They hadn't forgotten the day. They had simply deleted me from the guest list. And as I clicked through the smiling faces, searching for a sign, a mistake, I realized the truth was far colder than the November air. They hadn't just excluded me. They had planned the entire feast around my absence. The carefully constructed facade of family loyalty was about to shatter. The morning of the autumn gathering had started with the familiar ritual. I woke before the chill had receded from the corners of my small cottage, known as Sterling Manor. My first thought, even before the kettle whistled, was of the pie. The sweet potato dessert, baked the previous night, rested on the counter, just as it had every year for decades. It was my signature offering, my quiet, reliable role in the Vance family gathering. It was understood. Julian, my son, managed the main course, the drinks, and the logistics. Sienna, his wife, curated the presentation and the atmosphere. Elise, my granddaughter, often handled the music or the decorations. And I, Eleanor, provided the heart, the dessert and the silent stability. But this year, the usual rhythm was broken. No final message, no hurried call from Julian checking in. It had been 3 days since our last brief exchange. I told myself what a lifetime of motherhood teaches you to say. He's busy. He's running around trying to please Sienna, as usual. Yet, a nervous whisper started echoing in the back of my mind. A subtle note of dread I couldn't brush off. I focused on the preparations only I could control. I moved slowly, dressing with care. I selected my deep crimson shawl, the one Julian always said highlighted the warmth in my complexion. I pinned a small antique silver brooch to my chest and combed out my silver curls. Standing before the mirror, I offered myself a small, reassuring nod. You still possess your dignity, Eleanor. Then I positioned myself at the front window. Waited. I watched the gold and brown leaves swirl in the driveway. I watched a neighbor's children hurry down the sidewalk, arms laden with foil-covered dishes and brightly wrapped containers. The clock kept moving, indifferent to my anxiety. Around 11:30 a.m., I reheated my coffee. By 1 p.m., the coffee was poured down the drain, untouched. My phone, positioned face up on the side table, remained stubbornly silent. No texts, no missed calls, not even the simplest running late update. By 3 p.m., the pie had achieved perfect room temperature, and my fingers ceased their habit of refreshing the screen. I dialed Julian's number. It rang twice, then immediately switched to voicemail. I didn't speak a message. Instead, I walked back to my kitchen table, the very same surface where I had spent a lifetime nurturing, teaching, and supporting them. I lit a single candle, a habit born of countless holidays, and set it beside the untouched pie. I fixed myself a small, solitary plate, some greens and ham left over from the night before. I whispered a quiet grace, trying desperately to consume the food without tasting the bitterness that mingled with the salt. I practiced the hard-won piece of self-sufficiency. By 5 p.m., the pretense had crumbled completely. I gave up on believing a car would pull up my driveway. My desperation led me to my phone, and I opened the digital window into their lives. It was, without question, my first mistake. The first image that materialized was Sienna, beaming, her arm wrapped tightly around Julian. They were posed in front of a magnificent, perfectly roasted golden bird, the centerpiece of a dining table polished to a mirror sheen. The caption read, So grateful for this beautiful life and our beautiful people. #family first. The digital applause was immediate and deafening. Dozens of likes flooded the screen. The comments were already pouring in. Such a gorgeous spread. Where is Mama Vance? Eleanor didn't make the pie this year. My hands began to shake uncontrollably as I navigated through the photo album. There was Elise, holding a glass of amber cider, laughing with relatives I hadn't seen since the previous spring. There was Julian, carefully dispensing wine. And there was Sienna, holding a glass pie dish, the one I had gifted her the previous Christmas, filled with a dessert that was clearly not mine. No one had mentioned me. Not a single chair at that impossibly long table was vacant. The terrible realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. They hadn't merely forgotten me. They had meticulously orchestrated a holiday where I was not welcome. My chest tightened, and my throat felt instantly dry. I stared at the high-definition image, searching frantically for any possibility of an error, a glitch, a sign that I had missed an invitation. But the evidence was clear, cruel, and smiling directly back at me. A perfect autumn gathering lived out digitally, intentionally excluding the matriarch. My thumb hesitated over the like button, but I pulled away. I set the phone down with agonizing care, stood, and walked back to the window. The street was dark now, the neighboring porch lights casting a comforting soft yellow glow. Faint, distant laughter drifted from 2 houses down. I felt like an apparition in my own life, a ghost breathing in a space that no one else remembered or accounted for. I wrapped my famous sweet potato pie in foil and slid it into the refrigerator. I did not cry yet. I sat back down alone. The candle flickered weakly beside my plate. I reached for my phone again, not to scroll, but to reread the last message I had sent Julian a week prior. Let me know what time you'll be coming by to pick me up. I've got the pie ready. Had been delivered. It had been read. It had been left on the digital equivalent of ignored. That was when the tears finally came. They weren't loud or dramatic. They were soft, steady, and relentless. They rolled down my cheeks as I neatly folded my napkin and placed it on the side of my empty plate. It was the first holiday meal I had ever eaten alone. And I resolved it would be the very last time I accepted this silence. I woke the next morning still in my maroon shawl, having fallen asleep in the armchair. The phone was still resting in my lap. The candle had burned down to a blackened stub. The air in the room smelled distinctly of cold disappointment and the faint, sweet trace of forgotten pie. My back ached, a sharp, familiar consequence of sitting too long without proper support. I reached for the phone, still clinging to the foolish habit of checking for a message after 76 years of established routine. Still nothing. No calls from Julian, no texts from Elise. Not even the flippant, overly cheerful emoji that Sienna often deployed when avoiding responsibility. The digital equivalent of "oops, we forgot." I reopened the social media app. Their post had exploded overnight, gaining over 100 new reactions and countless comments. Sienna had been actively replying, accepting compliments on the spread. I focused on her smile in the photos. It wasn't just happiness, I realized. It was a look of quiet triumph, as if she had finally achieved her perfect polished holiday, free of what she silently considered extra weight dragging it down. Then I saw it, a strange detail. Elise had tagged me. It must have been an oversight, a careless click during the hurried uploading process. But there it was. A blue, clickable hyperlink under the family portrait, listing Eleanor Vance. I clicked it, my breath catching in my throat. I half expected to see another public photo, or perhaps a delayed message. Instead, it opened a thread, a long, agonizingly detailed discussion. It was a private family communication group that Sienna had established. I had never been added. Elise's tag, by some accident or moment of divine timing, had granted me temporary access. In that horrifying moment I saw everything. The thread began 2 weeks before the autumn gathering. Sienna, are we honestly inviting Eleanor again this year? I simply cannot handle her moping over the table. It drags the mood down, and it takes her an age to get out of the car. Julian, she's my mother, Jazz. Julian still used that ridiculous nickname. Sienna, and I am your wife. Pick a struggle. Elise. No reply. Sienna, again, let's just keep it contained this year. She won't create a fuss. Tell her dinner is cancelled or something. She'll stay home and do her little quiet prayer thing. Post a picture of the pie if she even asks. Julian, thumbs up, a thumbs up emoji. That tiny yellow icon was the deepest wound. It wasn't the insults about my presence or the calculated exclusion. It was the laziness, the silent complicity of my own son. I scrolled through more messages, jokes about my tendency to fall asleep after the meal the previous year, complaints about my stories, and how Sienna couldn't bear the odor of medicated balm and dusty perfume. Julian had responded with laughter. And Elise. She didn't offer a word of protest or defense. She simply liked a comment here and there, and when Sienna said I was ruining the aesthetic, Elise sent a gif of someone rolling their eyes. I sat in devastating silence, reading every single word. Each message was like a paper cut, small on its own, but together they left me bleeding out. It wasn't just that I hadn't been invited. It was the active, enthusiastic consensus that I was unwanted. They had planned a holiday specifically intended to cut out the woman who had nurtured them, the foundation upon which their lives were built. I looked around the room. Framed photographs covered the walls. Their graduations, their birthdays, Julian's wedding, Elise's baby shower. In all of them I was smiling, usually positioned slightly behind them, cooking, holding a child, offering a drink. I was never the focus. I was the essential support beam. And now they had decided to tear me out of the foundation, treating me like a bothersome weed. I remembered paying for Julian's tuition after his father passed away. I remembered taking out a substantial loan to help Sienna launch her little bakery venture. I remembered walking Elise to the school bus every morning because Sienna was perpetually too busy. That evening, I acted with a strange, chilling clarity. I opened the small safe hidden in my bedroom wall. Inside, sealed and ready for the winter holidays, was an envelope labeled Christmas. I had penned the letter inside 2 months earlier. It contained the letter to Julian and Elise, accompanied by a notarized copy of my original will. My resources were greater than they had ever suspected. I had spent years quietly saving birthday gifts, pinching pennies, and selling off jewelry I never wore. Sterling Manor was entirely paid off. My retirement accounts were robust, and I held several profitable bonds recommended years ago. It wasn't immense generational wealth, but it was certainly enough to significantly alter their futures. My original plan was to grant them everything: the house to Julian, a trust fund for Elise's education, and even a percentage of the savings earmarked for Sienna, hoping it might finally soften her resentment and make her feel included. But now my understanding was absolute. I placed the envelope on the kitchen table. I stared at the sealed document for a long, silent moment. Then, I retrieved a pair of scissors from the drawer. I cut the envelope down the middle, right through the last name, Vance. I didn't feel rage yet. I felt an overwhelming sense of clarity. I was finished with the lie that loyalty should be expected without reciprocation. They had been poised to inherit everything. Now they were about to understand the consequence of possessing nothing. I picked up the phone and called Victoria Hayes, my lawyer. "Eleanor. Happy autumn gathering," she answered, the traditional greeting sounding hollow. "Wait, is everything all right? I need to rewrite my will," I stated. Tonight. Tonight, okay," Victoria said, her voice remaining steady. "I will come to you first thing in the morning." I leaned back in my chair and looked at the pieces of the shattered envelope strewn across the table. The feeling was profound, not of satisfaction, but of being finally unburdened. Victoria arrived promptly at 9 a.m. the following day. She was, as always, meticulously punctual, a trait she exhibited even as a teenager volunteering at the local community center. She entered Sterling Manor carrying a briefcase and an expression I recognized as fierce compassion. "I brought coffee," she said, handing me a steaming mug. "Thought you might need it more than me." I managed a small, tired smile, having slept very little. We sat at the kitchen table, the sacred space where I had taught Julian to write, bandaged his scraped knees, and answered calls late into the night after his father died. The same table they had all conveniently forgotten existed. Victoria opened her case and laid out the blank legal documents. "Are you entirely certain about this step?" she asked gently. I met her gaze directly. "I was going to alter their lives for the better," I stated. "Now I am going to safeguard someone else's." Victoria nodded, offering no further questions. We reviewed the will line by line. I formally struck through Julian's name. I removed Sienna entirely. I paused momentarily over Elisa's name. She was young, yes, but she had chosen silence when action was required. She lost her claim too. In their stead, I designated the Serenity Sanctuary, a local nonprofit dedicated to providing housing, essential services, and educational support to elderly women who had been displaced or abandoned by their families. I had supported them quietly for years. Now I was giving them everything. Sterling Manor, the investments, the life savings, the entirety of my assets. Victoria had brought the necessary witnesses. My neighbor, Mrs. Hayes, and the young postal clerk from the main road. They signed the documents and departed without inquiry. In less than an hour, my life's collected work was legally reassigned. Felt lighter. Not triumphant or happy, but profoundly unburdened. Victoria reached for her coat. "What is your next course of action?" she inquired. I looked down at my hands, resting in my lap. "I think," I replied, "I will finally disclose the truth." That evening, I opened the social media application again. The image of Sienna smiling beside my son, Elise raising a glass in a manufactured toast, was still prominently displayed. The comments continued to pour in. Beautiful family goals. So much affection in these photos. I stared at the words that had been so corrupted in my life. Love, family, beautiful. I clicked the Create Post icon. I didn't begin typing immediately. I simply stared at the cursor, blinking its relentless rhythm. Then I opened the phone's gallery. I selected the saved screenshots of the group chat, the deliberate jokes, the lies, the consensus to exclude me. I uploaded them one by one. Next, I selected the photograph I had taken the previous night. Me sitting absolutely alone at the kitchen table, a single plate, the candle flickering, the pie untouched behind me. My expression in the photo was quiet, not filled with anger or tears, but just still. I posted all of it, but not on my personal feed. I posted directly into the Vance family private group, the space where Sienna curated their polished perfection, where they shared flawless baby updates and smiling matching outfits. I hit the initial upload button. Then I started writing the caption. This was my autumn gathering. I waited diligently by the window. Baked the pie. I dressed up. No one arrived. I was planning a major surprise for you all next month. I had written the letter, prepared the documents, and made detailed plans to pass along everything I had worked for. The home, the investments, your entire future. But you have made it unequivocally clear that I am no longer considered family. I've updated my will. I will not be a source of burden in your photos, at your dinners, or within your legacy. But I assure you I will be remembered. Just not by you. I read the post over 3 times before hitting post. I set the phone down and walked out onto the porch. The sky was a vibrant canvas of pink and orange, and the late fall wind rustled through the trees. For the first time in days, I allowed myself a small, gentle smile. The repercussions began almost immediately. 10 minutes later, my phone started vibrating. Notifications, dozens, then hundreds. Relatives commenting. What is the meaning of this? Old acquaintances messaging me, utterly shocked. Distant relations asking why they hadn't heard from me in so long. The photo quickly circulated beyond the private group. Someone had screenshotted it and reposted it with the damning caption. This is absolutely heartbreaking. Be kinder to your elders. By the time the night was over, the post had been shared more than 1,000 times. The comments were relentless. I cannot believe they treated you this way. You deserve so much better. "You are not alone, we see you." The most crushing responses came from inside the extended family. Aunt Clara, Julian's aunt, wrote, "Julian, is this account factual?" Relative Phoebe, "I spoke with Eleanor last week. She was so looking forward to the gathering. I am sickened by this." And then came the message from Julian himself. "Ma, this is not how it appears. There is much going on. Please, can we discuss this privately?" I didn't offer a reply. The truth was no longer a private matter. They had publicly displayed their holiday. I had publicly displayed mine. The world could now judge the profound difference. The following morning, I woke to a telephone that would not stop demanding attention. It was barely 7 a.m. My notifications had multiplied exponentially overnight. My fingers trembled as I picked it up. I had anticipated maybe a few more comments. I was utterly unprepared for the fact that the post had been shared nearly 3,000 times. I was no longer merely viral within my family sphere. The story had spread globally. Complete strangers were reposting my picture and my words. Some hailed me as brave. Others condemned the family as disgraceful. Women from different countries were writing to me, saying, "You articulated what we all feel." The specialized tags took on a life of their own. #forgotten and Thanksgiving, #eldershame. Right in the center of the outrage was my quiet, lonely face at that table. That single photograph had achieved what 76 years of unwavering loyalty had failed to do. It had forced people to truly see me. By the middle of the day, the private Vance family group was submerged in chaos. Extended relatives who had seen the public post flooded the group. Aunt Clara posted a long, scorching denunciation. "I am utterly ashamed. Eleanor is my sister-in-law and one of the most dignified women I know. To exclude her like this on a day meant for gratitude is vile. I raised Julian better than this. Sienna, I don't know you well, but I understand exactly what this says about your character." Sienna, predictably, attempted damage control. She posted a flimsy excuse. "There are always two perspectives. We never intended for things to be hurtful." The gathering was extremely hectic this year, and communication was simply lost in the shuffle. I almost laughed at the sheer absurdity. Lost in the shuffle. As if this were forgetting to buy napkins, not a deliberate, planned exclusion of the family's source of stability, followed by mocking her in a hidden forum. But Sienna wasn't prepared for the next wave. Elise, my granddaughter, commented, "It wasn't just a like. It wasn't just a sorry, Grandma." She posted a full, detailed paragraph. "I know I was deeply wrong. I saw the messages. I deliberately said nothing. I genuinely thought that staying quiet was less damaging than escalating things. But silence, I realize now, is also a decision. And I made the wrong one. I am truly sorry, Grandma. I truly, truly am." I read her apology 3 times. It changed nothing, but it was more of a response than Julian had offered. Speaking of Julian, he called twice. I allowed the first attempt to go to voicemail. I let the second ring unanswered. By the 3rd time I finally answered, not out of forgiveness, but because I needed to register how rapidly his world had collapsed in the span of 48 hours. His voice was thin and tight. "Ma," he said, "am I disturbing your lunch?" I responded calmly. He sighed, exasperated. "You know precisely what I mean. Look, this has gotten entirely out of hand. The post is everywhere. My coworkers are asking me for explanations. Sienna is distraught. Elise won't even leave her bedroom. You have made your point, okay?" My voice remained steady. "No," I said clearly. "My point was never meant only for you. It was meant for everyone who believes people like me won't defend themselves." "People are turning against us," he whispered. "They should be," I affirmed. Then, I delivered the definitive truth he had yet to hear. "I was prepared to leave you everything, Julian," I stated. "The house, the accounts, the investments. I had the legal documents ready, sealed with your name on the envelope." He stammered. "Wait. What are you talking about?" "I modified it," I continued. "The night I ate alone, I called Victoria and signed everything over to the Serenity Sanctuary. Ma, stop. Come on, he pleaded. I raised my voice just enough to silence him. I was isolated, Julian. Not because I neglected to reach out, but because my own son told his wife I ruined the aesthetic. You discarded me like a stain on your carpet, and now you expect to wipe the slate clean with guilt. Oh, sir. I am not your shame sponge. He was silent for a prolonged period. Then he whispered, defeated. You truly signed it all away. Yes, I confirmed. He immediately hung up. No goodbye, no fight, just the sudden silence. That final silence was the unmistakable sound of everything fundamentally shifting. By the end of the week, I had received 5 inquiries from local media outlets requesting interviews. I politely declined every one. I had no need for cameras or microphones. My statement was complete. Instead, I visited the Serenity Sanctuary. I presented the executive director, a woman named Carla, with the first formal check from the newly established Eleanor Vance Legacy Trust. She embraced me with such fervor I felt I might break. You cannot imagine how many women this immense gift is going to help, Carla murmured. I do know, I told her quietly, smiling. That evening I posted one last message into the family group. To all of you who contacted me, messaged me, or simply stayed silent, this marks my final communication here. I will not be attending the winter holidays, nor will I respond to further questions. My legacy now resides in a different place. You had the opportunity to construct something enduring with me. Instead, you built a wall around me. And now, I have permanently stepped out of your constructed world. I logged out immediately after posting. I settled onto my sofa with a warm herbal tea and gazed out at the cold gray sky. The candle from the night of the gathering was long gone, but I had replaced it with a fresh, bright red one. It was unlit, waiting, not for them but for me. I had assumed they would let the entire incident subside. I expected Julian and Sienna to retreat, licking their wounds privately, allowing the acute embarrassment to dissipate like a fleeting storm. They did not. That following weekend, I heard a decisive knock on the front door. It was not soft or tentative. It was a hard, full-palmed strike, as if someone hoped to shake an apology loose through brute force. I didn't move from the couch. Another knock. I peeked through the side window. It was Julian, completely alone. No Sienna, no Elise. He was clutching a plastic grocery bag, likely containing a symbolic peace offering, some leftover dessert or a piece of fowl, something related entirely to image management and nothing to true remorse. I didn't answer the door. He knocked again, calling my name. Ma, please. I continued to stare at the door, treating it like a solid, impenetrable wall. I only want to speak, he insisted. I remained motionless. Ma, come on. This is becoming ridiculous, he complained. Ridiculous. I almost laughed aloud at the choice of word. It was the same dismissive tone Sienna had used when I questioned an inappropriate outfit for Elise, and the exact tone Julian employed when he claimed, "We're not observing holidays like that anymore." Suddenly, my necessary silence was the problem. He waited 10 minutes before departing. No note was left, no voice message, and the groceries vanished with him. He disappeared in a puff of exhaust down the street. I waited patiently, just to ensure he was fully gone. Later that afternoon, Elise sent a message. This one was not brief. It began, "Grandma, I know perfectly well I don't deserve any forgiveness." I read the entire lengthy text. She apologized profusely for her complicity, for laughing at their jokes, and for failing to stand up for me when it mattered most. She confessed that Julian and Sienna were locked in constant arguments, that their house was tense, and that she had been crying daily since the holiday. Then came the sentence that resonated. "I miss you. I miss sitting in your kitchen. I miss your stories. I miss how you always made sufficient space for everyone." It was a beautiful, sincere letter. But it arrived after the betrayal, after the silence, and long after the wrong people had been publicly exposed. I didn't respond immediately. It wasn't because I felt nothing, I did. But I had devoted too many decades to being the comfortable, soft landing place for everyone else. I had continuously created space for them, while they had eliminated mine. Now I was deliberately creating room for myself. The next morning, Victoria dropped by, handing me a substantial folder containing the finalized legal documents for the Eleanor Vance Legacy Trust. My signature was notarized, and Sterling Manor was officially donated as part of the trust. The sanctuary was scheduled to take ownership the following spring, planning to expand their residential housing for senior women who had been displaced. You have single-handedly established a future for women you will likely never meet, Victoria observed, closing the folder. I simply nodded. I did not smile. That night I finally lit the red candle. I required no holiday or specific occasion. I only desired to sit in my own living room, sipping warm chamomile tea, and experience what it felt like to be in full control of my own narrative. No performance, no obligation, just me, enveloped in the kind of quiet that felt genuinely earned. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Sienna. The message was short. We should have conducted ourselves better. I'm sorry. I read it twice. The second time, I noted the complete lack of punctuation, reflecting a flat sentence devoid of genuine emotion. It said everything and yet nothing. I did not reply. 2 days later, Elise attempted contact again. Grandma, I know I cannot undo what occurred, but may I come and visit you? Just for a brief tea, no expectations attached. I considered this request for a long time. I even drafted a possible response. But I never pressed send. Sometimes, silence is the clearest and most absolute boundary a woman can draw. I had spent far too much of my life drawing soft lines in the sand, lines that others simply stepped over as if they weren't even there. Instead, I pulled out the thank you letters the sanctuary had mailed me. There were 11, all handwritten by women whose names I did not know, whose lives I had not lived, but whose specific pain I understood intimately. One wrote, "You provided me with a roof when my own daughter stated I was too financially expensive to care for." Another, "This is the first winter holiday I've experienced in 10 years where I feel completely safe." One simply said, "You reminded me that I am not refuse." I folded them carefully and placed them into a wooden box, alongside my oldest recipes and my Bible, things that were truly worth safeguarding. Later that night I checked the family group one final time. It was still there, but now it was utterly quiet. No new photos, no posts, no holiday updates. My final message was still pinned, still burning gently at the core of their carefully curated little digital world. I clicked the Leave Group button. The system asked, "Are you sure?" Clicked yes. I had no need to monitor the aftermath any longer. Let them clean up the mess. Let them attempt to rebuild their aesthetic without me. The next morning I walked into the town center, my scarf wrapped tightly around my chin, my heart palpably lighter than it had been in years. I passed the Main Street bakery where Sienna worked, but I did not glance toward the window. I held no interest in watching people pretending. Instead, I stopped at the Serenity Sanctuary. I dropped off a pie I had baked the previous night. Carla hugged me again and said, "You will always find a welcome here." And for the first time in a long time I believed the words. I had been raised to believe that legacy meant blood. That everything we saved, everything we sacrificed, should naturally be passed to our children, unconditionally. But after that awful holiday, I finally abandoned that belief. Legacy is not determined by who shares your surname, I concluded. It is defined by who arrives when no one else is watching. It's about the person who pulls up a chair before you are forced to ask, the one who calls before you are forgotten, the one who checks in, not for the sake of holidays or hashtags, but because your silence genuinely matters to them. Took me 76 years of life to fully internalize that truth. I only wish I had understood it sooner. The days that followed my exit from the Vance family group were peaceful. No further drama, no more aggressive knocks on the door, no more panicked messages from Julian or Sienna, not even Elise. I think they finally understood the permanence of my decision, or perhaps they simply gave up the effort. Either way, I felt no loss. I had located something infinitely better. Carla, the director at the sanctuary, asked if I would be willing to speak at their annual winter dinner. Just a few concise words to the women staying there, some who had endured abandonment, eviction, and years of stretching silence that I could barely imagine. I readily accepted. I wore a simple gray dress and a scarf embroidered with bright sunflowers, the same scarf I had worn to Elise's high school graduation years ago. I remembered Sienna remarking that it was a bit loud. But that evening, standing among a group of women who had all shared the same particular type of heartbreak, it felt perfectly, wonderfully right. I briefly shared my story, not to dominate the space, but to reassure them they were not isolated. I thought I would age peacefully in the embrace of the people I raised, I told them. Instead, I achieved wisdom in their profound absence. They applauded. Some openly wept. One woman approached me afterward and whispered, "My son sent me away after I became ill. You helped me finally stop blaming myself." That heartfelt hug meant more to me than any forced holiday toast my family could have ever produced. Later that night, Carla guided me to a room in the shelter. They had named it in my honor. The Eleanor Room. A small plaque designated it as a safe space for women to rest, reset, and feel secure, especially grandmothers who have nowhere remaining to go. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, my hand resting over my heart. I had given away the house I once planned to leave to my son. And for the first time in my life, I truly felt that my work had landed exactly where it was meant to be. I posted one final photo online, to my own personal wall of course, as the other bridge was incinerated. It was just me, standing beside the brass plaque. I included no caption. The people who understood, understood. The ones who did not were no longer invited to ask. 2 weeks later, a card arrived in the mail. It was handwritten, bearing no return address. I instantly recognized Elise's looping script. She offered no excuses and made no desperate pleas. She wrote simply, "I have been thinking deeply about how relentlessly you kept showing up for us, and how little we ever bothered to show up for you. You did not deserve what we did. I know it is profoundly too late to request forgiveness, but if you should ever wish to have tea, just tea, no promises, I will be there. With love, Elise." I folded the letter slowly and placed it within a drawer. I did not write back immediately. I needed her to sit with the silence, to taste it, the very same way I had when they left me by that window, pie cooling in the refrigerator, crimson shawl draped over my shoulders, waiting for a vehicle that never materialized. Redemption requires time, dedicated effort, and acknowledged loss. I am not consumed by bitterness. I am simply finished with always being the one who initiates the reaching out. The winter holidays came. I spent the morning at the sanctuary, just as I had resolved to do. We shared a small, artificial tree, sang old carols, enjoyed a hot dinner, and generated enough laughter to fill the rooms with a feeling that genuinely resembled family. The good kind of family, the kind that never demands you diminish yourself. I brought my famous pie again. This time it was entirely consumed, every last slice. As the evening drew to a close, I sat beside a woman named Myra. She recounted the story of her son leaving her at a bus station 3 years prior. He had simply said, "Wait here, I'll be back," and never returned. Myra smiled as she told the tale, though her eyes remained watery. "I am truly sorry," I offered. "I am not sorry," she countered. "I wouldn't have encountered these incredible ladies if he hadn't done it." We raised our teacups in a quiet, shared toast. "To new beginnings," I proposed. "To peace," she finished. When I returned to Sterling Manor that night, I looked around the familiar living room, the same old furniture, the identical tired curtains. Yet everything felt fundamentally new. The profound silence was now mine. It was chosen, it was owned, and it was peaceful. I curled up on the sofa with a warm blanket and lit one last candle, a gold one flickering softly on the coffee table. I didn't wait for the phone to ring. I didn't refresh the screen. I didn't wonder about Julian, Sienna, or Elise. I already knew where they were. They were looking desperately backward. And I was finally beautifully done doing the same. Let them scroll. Let them offer their flimsy explanations.